This is Radio Cairo. We're coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dr. Muhammad is at the control. And today in the world of info, we are very proud to have with us a distinguished, real diplomat who has served the whole world, if we may use the expression. Her Excellency Ambassador Elena Panova, the Ambassador of the United Nations in Cairo, or the representative or the coordinator, but she is mainly heading all the United Nations organizations actively working in Egypt with a degree from Sofia University in a master's degree in international law and an undergraduate degree in economics. She served the United Nations in Bulgaria, New York, Ukraine, Palestine, Turkey, New York, again, and working in Turkmenistan and Egypt as a representative of the United Nations and, of course, of the Secretary General. Well, it's a great pleasure and honor, Your Excellency, that you have come to our program, and I know how busy you are. I mean, with a job like yours, I believe that you are 24/7 working, right?
That's true, Dr. Amr, and thank you very much for having me.
It's a great pleasure and honor, madam. Absolutely. Really, I've been waiting for this for quite a long time.
And somehow, and also the timing is right?
Yes.
Because the month of October was the UN month.
Yes.
This is when we celebrated 80th anniversary of the foundation of the United Nations.
And it's a very special organization because the United Nations, Egypt was one of the original signatories of this great establishment, an establishment that has had a very bad experience with its predecessor, that is the League of Nations. We know, of course, that President Wilson tried his best after World War I in 1919 to inaugurate the League of Nations, and he failed to convince the Congress of the United States to make the United States, which was the victorious partner in the war, to be a member of the Nation of Leagues, and therefore the Nation of Leagues was born prematurely and not surviving. But there was another trial. There was the United Nations in 1945 with great aspirations and great work, and behind it were a lot of people who really mark it, because looking back, how would you assess the organization impact and evolution in key areas such as multilateralism and sustainable development, and what lessons can be drawn from its journey so far?
You're absolutely right. And for us to assess how the organization evolved, we need to, of course, go backwards and look how it was established. You were just mentioning that Egypt was one of the 51 members that founded the United Nations. You were sitting together with others and drafting the charter, which is, of course, the foundational document for the United Nations. And you should be absolutely proud of this, because that's the core of the UN, that's the core of multilateralism, and it still is the most relevant document on which the humanity agreed. So back in San Francisco for 2 months drafting the charter, and then it was in April, if I'm not mistaken, it was signed by the 51, but the actual establishment of the foundation of the United Nations is considered 24th of October. We just celebrated 1945. Yes. This was when the charter. This was when the charter was ratified by a number of countries, but most importantly, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council at that time. That time it wasn't Russia, it was Soviet Union, together with China, together with France, with the United Kingdom, United States, that ratified the charter, and that's why, together with others, of course, and that's why 24th is considered, although the actual signature was earlier in June 1945.
Well, actually, looking at that, I mean, we have in 1945 a lot of dates that really are related to the United Nations. First of all, of course, the 8th of May, which is the final day of war in Europe. And the signature of the surrender of the Axis forces in Europe in 1945 on the 8th of May, and of course the United Nations costed us the life of one of our prime ministers who was shot because they thought he has declared war in the very final days of the war to have a right to be one of the signatories of the United Nations, and the fanatic guy just killed him. And there was the great important role of Ambassador Mahmoud Azmi, who has the one of the lawyers and the grand lawyers of Egypt who was involved in the formation of the charter and the signatories. So Egypt had a role. Egypt worked hard for doing this and paid a lot of heavy prices from that time onwards. So tell us about how far was the United Nations in the first years trying to do or to navigate with the end of the war and then finding the whole world divided into two sectors, I mean two camps. This, I think, were tough times for the United Nations. I'm talking about the 40s.
Yeah, absolutely. That first phase of basically establishing the legitimacy of the United Nations was very hard because they were these superpowers. So you need the main purpose, the main focus of the UN was to contain the peace, to make sure that the peace is there. And that first phase actually was from 46, I would say, until 91, when, that's a huge, when we had almost 5, I think, consecutive secretary generals, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the word of Churchill, which said the Iron Curtain is falling between the East and the West.
It's the Cold War time, when you had to make sure that these superpowers are contained so that, another war. And there were many threats. There was the Cuba missiles, crisis, and it was one of the SGs
and there was
that helped.
The Korean War as well.
Of course, the Korean War.
And the forces that were fighting the separatists at that time were called the United Nations forces. I mean, this was really very dreadful times.
Absolutely.
1948 war in Egypt, 1956 the tripartite aggression. So really, we can see the words of United Nations. We can see characters bigger than life, like Dag Hammarskjöld, who we always remember him. And I know that this gentleman, his wordings and his life is commemorated in the hearts of all the people who worked in the United Nations, and of course in the grand building, which I have seen myself in New York, where Dag Hammarskjöld is respected and given the whole credit for being such a distinguished person.
And he was actually one of the SGs that first launched the whole concept of peacekeeping.
Yes.
Right? He was the one.
With the Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Exactly.
At that time.
So we really, we need to give him all the credit, and he is highly regarded, as you mentioned also. And even nowadays, UN is very closely collaborating with the foundation that is on his name. They are a trusted partner because of the values that they continue to uphold. We do, a lot of joint work with the foundation that is named after him. And we know how he also died. Very unfortunate, of course.
Up till now, nobody can really know the reason and how the plane was shot or whatever and was put down.
But, he was on his way to Congo, right?
Yes.
To basically broker
a peace deal.
Yes. So,
he was a very distinguished man, and every time we have here a Swedish ambassador in our program, we always consecutively they always show the respect and admiration to such a character out of this world. He, of course, and Count Bernadotte. So when we talk about this, we can see the role of the general, especially in the first years, to help to can we say mold or do some sculpturing of the whole establishment to emphasize the role of the United Nations?
Of course. This is when all the bodies were created, the Secretariat was created, but the most important thing was to contain the peace.
Yes.
Right? That was, the focus during the Cold War. And some of the Secretary Generals also, played a role in brokering, behind the scenes, especially I mentioned the Cuba Missile Crisis between Khrushchev and Kennedy. He was the one who basically provided that safe channel that helped at the end of the day to overcome.
Again, Dag Hammarskjöld.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was the U-Thumb.
Uthans?
Uthand.
Yes.
Yeah, that was him. I think actually, I'm sure. Yeah, but these were the years when UN was learning how to walk, right? So they were trying to keep the tempers between also the superpowers, and of course. As we were mentioning, some of these approaches, how to contain the peace, were born at that time, the peacekeeping.
Yes. So afterwards, we can always talk about different organizations that really were working on. There are a lot of organizations that work under the umbrella of the United Nations, and you worked for many years in the UNDP itself. Could you tell us something about the UNDP?
UNDP, I'm indeed, all my career was in UNDP. UNDP is the biggest development organization of the United Nations system with the broadest mandate. So the mandate of UNDP is to integrate, and that's how I know it was born, to integrate the work of the UN in development. Because initially, this first phase we were discussing, the work was really focused on peace, security. With the time, the UN realized that it should not only focus on peacekeeping, but it also needs to start setting agendas in development. It was clear that you cannot have peace without development, right? You need to invest in development. And UNDP was one of the first UN agencies that was established to basically invest in the development of the country. In social, in economic development, and UNDP continues to be one of the largest UN agencies underpinning, foundationally the work of the UN, and having the broadest, as I mentioned, mandate when it comes to development mandate. So having the experience of working in UNDP helps you a lot to also, because the mandate is so broad, helps you a lot when you are a coordinator. If you have the experience of UNDP, that helps you also understand the mandates of the rest of the agencies, because they are more focused, right? If you take UNICEF purely on children, right? If you take, UN Women, on women and girls. If you take, UNEP, it's clearly environment. WHO Health. UNDP is the one that applies this biased, integration. Huh? No, I'm not. I'm just trying to explain the nature of UNDP as an integrator of these mandates.
Yes, we can see that the people who signed the United Nations charters were thinking of a utopic world. They really wanted, and I think they were right, because if the world has seen peace since 1945 without all the wars that happened, I believe that the world would have definitely been a very peaceful, a very beautiful place to live in. And this is the controversy, because the charter was signed by the idealists, the people who thought that miracles can happen. And up till now, I always believe that people like you and people like every diplomat who worked in the United Nations, when he joined this great establishment, thought of the world peace and the world prosperity with no bias. So this always makes a place for me always of admiring your work, which I think you sometimes face a lot of frustrations, right? It's a partially personal question, but I mean, I think so, right?
And of course, you face, constantly frustrations, because it's more than a job, right?
Yeah. You're dealing with lives.
It's a cause.
Yes.
It's a cause, right?
Yes.
If you, work for the UN, and if you have devoted your life on working for the UN, it's more than a job, until from 8 to 5.
Yes.
It goes beyond, and with that, of course, goes a huge pressure, a huge responsibility. Of course, a lot of aspirations for better and fairer and more resilient, world, which as we know, is not the case. On the contrary, we had, a period when multilateralism was something highly valued, when countries were genuinely trying to solve the problems, the global problems, collectively, and there are a number of landmark, agendas, right? If you take the Millennium Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goals, these are global agendas. If you take, the climate, the Paris Agreement on climate. So this is when that's really a multilateralism in action, when the countries realizing that the problems are so complex, the problems are so diverse, they don't have, borders, right? Whether developed countries. And they were coming together collectively, agreeing on a global agenda. And with time, it's very frustrating to see that huge geopolitical, including wars, the pandemic, the COVID, they literally derailed the gains that were achieved as a result of that collective effort. And more, we see that multilateralism is being attacked, obviously. We see that countries are more moving towards, the bilateral space. Recently, we heard the statement of the new U.S. representative to the UN, and he was very clear. For us, the economic development is the national security, and we take it bilaterally. So multilateralism is being attacked. However, that's the best way when you balance the interest of the country, when they come together for complex problems that go beyond the national borders. So as UN, although it's very frustrating, as you were saying, I think we still, not I think, I'm convinced that still multilateralism is the way to go. And the humanity has never had a better agenda than the Sustainable Development Agenda, which looks into the entire spectrum of sustainable development. So...
Well, definitely this is really tough. But of course, we have to talk now about your work in Egypt, because UN in Egypt has been present since 1945, and Egypt as a founding member of the UN plays a vital role in the multilateral system. Could you tell us about the UN's presence in Egypt, the scope of its activities, and how the UN country team works in partnership with the government, civil society? That's a long question, and other national stakeholders to support Egypt's development. I mean, this is a question about your job, because you are trying to coordinate between the different organizations, and they are getting back to you with all their problems, trying for you to solve them and to lead the whole teams, the different teams of the United Nations. And first of all the United Nations organizations are almost represented here in Egypt, right? Not a single one is absent. So
no, there are some that are non-resident,
yes,
but they still don't have work here.
Yes.
In principle,
so this
all.
Yes, yeah, because of the geopolitical position of Egypt, the number of the population, the whole Middle East region makes Egypt like a sort of a headquarters of a lot of United Nations activities. Tell us about your work here. And
Sure. And I will tell you, but before I go into how we work in Egypt, I want also your audience to understand that the positioning of UN in Egypt, it's indeed, a historical, very trusted relationship, but they also originate from the fact, as you mentioned, Egypt is not only a founding member, but Egypt historically had a leadership role. And that leadership role stretches back. All these years, Egypt has been a very reliable, very responsive, very proactive player globally in all the intergovernmental processes. And that, of course, translates also at country level. When you value the UN and you see the value of the UN, then of course you will be also very welcoming the United Nations work in Egypt. So in addition to the fact that we are here because Egypt wants us to be here and to accompany the country in its aspiration for sustainable development, also that global role is very important. Because you're shaping also the global agenda, right? When it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, very proactive. Here, Egypt, one of the first adopters. If you take, a number of resolutions, there are many eminent persons that were at high positions, not just the Secretary General, Boutros Boutros-Ghali, but before that, Mustafa Kemal Tolba. He was 17 years, right? The head of UNEP. Currently, you have USG Under Secretary General Rada Whaley, who is leading the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, an important agency that just a few days ago, on 24th of October, on the UN Day, they signed, or a number of countries ratified and signed the Convention on Cyber Crime and Cyber Security in Hanoi in Vietnam. Again, an Egyptian. And of course, recently,
that
Dr.
is
Khaled...
Mr. Wali, that's the...
Yes, that's Rada Whaley. Yeah. She is heading the organization that was basically, working on that convention, which was adopted at the GA last December, and then now in Hanoi, in October, a number of states ratified that convention in the presence of the Secretary General. She was there. And that's a huge achievement that took years of work for the world to come together behind a joint convention on cybersecurity. Very important.
Yes.
And that was under her leadership.
We had her in our program before.
Absolutely should have her again, because I think, she would be able to tell you much more about the importance of that convention. And then, of course, recently we are very proud with the historical of course, Khaled Anani, of course.
A dear friend of both of us.
Absolutely. It was historical. It was anonymously. His nomination.
He worked very hard. He's a very hard-working gentleman and a man with a motive and overqualified for the job, if you may ask me, because with his PhD, with his multilingual Egyptian, Arabic, English, and French, and his vast experience in everything, this makes him a real... this is a challenging work, but he's up to the challenge, I believe.
Yeah. No, and these are challenging times for the UN, right? He will be leading UNESCO in times of huge reforms
and huge troubles, because the United States wants to withdraw, and he said that his first task was to convince the Americans to stay on board. And I think it's not just because of the money. It's only $70 million that they pay every year for the UNESCO. What's important is that we don't want one of the biggest poles of power in the whole world to be out of this UNESCO, because it's not just with the culture only, because some people get the innovation or the impression that it is it's a cultural society or united or organization. Actually, it has to do with human beings, it has to do with human rights, it has to do do with a lot of things.
Including with water,
Yes.
by the way. A
Yeah.
lot of also, so many eminent Egyptians were leading the United Nations. So
Yes.
going back, here to Egypt, since you asked the question, indeed, we have one of the largest footprint historically. In Egypt, and that's again because Egypt understands the value and what the UN specialized agencies can bring to the country. I think Egypt is welcoming that large footprint. We have 34 UN entities in Egypt. And some of these entities also regional offices, right? 18 regional offices actually located in Cairo. One of them are really big, like EMRO. This is the regional office for WHO,
Yes.
which covers 22 countries.
Yes, yes.
WFP regional office that is located here. From here, they cover also Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, from Cairo. So these 34 UN entities, 18 regional. Some of the regional have also country operations here, and the agencies that are solely focused on the country are 26 resident and also 6 that are non-resident UN agencies. Like non-resident will be the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner for Human Rights, ITC, the International Trade Center, UNEP is also non-resident, just as an example. So big footprint, 2,300 is 2,000, actually 500 is the current staff, because it's very dynamic number, right? And out of this 2,500, you have around 500 internationals. The rest are national staff, Egyptians.
Do you sleep?
Listen, it's not an easy job, of course, to coordinate the work of all these powerhouses.
Powerhouses. And the way that you pick your employees, which is a very competitive way and very fair way. I know that there is no place for recommendation. You only pick the best for anyone who works in the United Nations. So you are responsible about 2,500 people who are working with you, who's usually most of them, their IQ is above 120. I don't envy you. People usually do with average and sub-average and whatever, but you're dealing with 120 and above. How is your day going? It's now 4:30 p.m. How are you doing?
It's overwhelming.
It's
I
overwhelming,
would say.
yes.
It's overwhelming.
In the beginning, you're very happy, but then suddenly discover that there are 2,500 minds of their own.
But also, we need to also, let me clarify here that each agency has a head of agency. So I'm coordinating, these heads of agencies who are high caliber, also UN workers, the best are sent to Egypt because, of the great collaboration partnership between the UN and Egypt, and because of the welcoming nature of the country. Of course, there are many developmental issues in Egypt. That's why you have also the full range of UN entities. There are environmental issues. Egypt is one of the countries that is severely hit by climate change. Look at the rising sea level, a hot spot. Look at the water scarcity. Egypt is a country that is water poor, right? Per capita in Egypt is 500
meters of water,
cubic meters, and the norm is 1,000. Below 1,000, you are water poor. So that they are a populous country, right, with huge population, which has a lot of needs, and let's not also forget that in addition to the development challenges which Egypt is facing, you have regional conflicts that bring pressure, right?
It's very nightmarish to think that from all the borders of Egypt there are troubles and there are civil wars and Egypt is like an oasis of stability in the middle, which makes it very special. Because after the break, we'll go for a break now. After the break, we'll talk about how far the chemistry between Antonio Guterres and President Sisi is working, because I think you have a very distinguished Secretary General with a great CV and the great positions that he has been taking all through his tenure, not here, but even not in the United Nations, but also in Portugal and as a professor in the university. This man is a very distinguished man, and I believe his aim for peace and is really uniting with our president in a lot of things that they are agreeing about. So stay tuned to us, because we have a very interesting talk with Her Excellency Ambassador Elena Panova, the ambassador of the United Nations in Egypt, in Radio Cairo. So you're still listening to Radio Cairo, the World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and we have with here to us in the program Her Excellency Ambassador Elena Panova, the ambassador of United Nations in Egypt. And we are talking about Antonio Guterres, the man who is a very distinguished secretary who found himself facing a very difficult period of the whole world. First of all, he came many times to Egypt, and of course he met our president, and there was a lot of chemistry in COP27 and in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he has given sort of an ultimatum, warning the whole world that if we don't take care of our environment, we are going to be doomed and lost. And then after that, they started what happened in the whole region surrounding us. So tell us about these burdens, if we may use the expression.
United Nations was the organization that first alarmed and also gathered the world leaders to sign the Paris Agreement, which was the first collective agreement signed by all 193 member states at that time. That was Ban Ki-moon. And when the current Secretary General was elected, he took the climate change, and of course based on silence, based on evidence, which was already very alarming, he took that agenda and he really, is owning the agenda of climate change. He's one of the most vocal voices when it comes to the impact of climate change. I think Egypt, being host of COP27, COP stands for Conference of Parties, basically the ones that signed the Paris Agreement. In 2015, they are the ones that gather every year and they, review the progress, the implementation of that agreement that was achieved. Antonio Guterres is someone who is very vocal, as I said, a very strong voice when it comes to, he strengthened his office with a lot of capacity in order to lead that work globally. And usually the Conference of Parties, these are UN, this is the biggest UN conference, because as I said, it's all the members have signed, where the member states come together and review. So 2 years ago, Egypt was hosting in 2022 the COP27, and Egypt was the country that clearly said there are many commitments, there are many pledges. It's time for us to focus on implementation. And I think that resonated very well with the UN Secretary General, and he put a lot of effort. We worked very hard from here with the HG office, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to put an agenda that indeed put the focus on implementation. So all these pledges had to, be looked at from implementation point of view. And Egypt was also very clear, because Egypt historically is a very strong voice among the G77. Egypt is a leader of the developing countries. So Egypt took that responsibility and said, we're going to deliver for the developing countries. We are going to bring, climate justice to be discussed at the table. Climate finance and the access to climate finance to be discussed. And one of the landmark achievements, and nobody believed, that Egypt will be able to pull it out with, close support of the United Nations, and the Secretary General himself, was the Loss and Damage Fund, as you know. Loss and Damage Fund is basically a fund that is established at the COP27 that is supporting the most vulnerable and most climate vulnerable developing countries. So bringing money together so that you support the countries that incurred losses and damages as a result of climate change
So
events.
this effort could not have been made without the support of the President to this initiative, and of course his agreement with Guterres in this direction. Yeah.
I'm first-hand witness of that good rapport between President Sisi and Secretary General Guterres.
Of course.
They share similar views when it comes to global agenda items, including climate change, including also geopolitical conflicts, and that, of course, sharing the same views helps a lot in joining efforts and being, by each other's side when you need to lead on resolving the conflicts and resolving the global issues. I think, we are very lucky with this, because that also translates into excellent relations and very trusted relations between the United Nations and the government of Egypt. And
so the first challenge was in 2022, the COP, and of course, unfortunately, the second challenge, beside, of course, what was happening in Libya and Syria and Sudan and Syria and Sudan and all that, was the October 7 incident, of course, and the war that stayed for all this period, and the Guterres work, and both the Secretary General and President Sisi refused the transfer. And Secretary General Guterres, I remember what he did, and you were also standing by his side on the gates of Rafah, and demanding that peace has to be made and that the saving of the lives of the innocent should be maintained. And of course, this great efforts in pulling the whole thing into actualization of the ceasefire. This was, and of course, the release of the hostages. This is work that really demands a lot of persistence, perseverance, and chemistry, as you have said.
Yeah, indeed. And a lot of hard work,
yes.
Every day. Because one of the values which UN brings to the table is the capacity to deliver humanitarian aid, to mobilize, and also to deliver humanitarian aid, to uphold to the international humanitarian law and to the international law. And in situations like the conflict in Gaza, you need a lot of humanitarian aid to be mobilized. And Egypt, being Egypt with its location, bordering Gaza, is the corridor which has the huge potential, the biggest potential in comparison to all the rest of the corridors to Gaza with regard to delivering humanitarian aid. And that's what is happening. United Nations, we have a humanitarian team, humanitarian support team that works in Al Arish by the side of the Egyptian Red Crescent Society. We mobilize humanitarian aid, we deliver humanitarian aid, and we also support the country with the medical evacuations, especially when Rafah was opened. And there were, a lot of medical evacuations. Egypt, United Nations, WHO, and the relevant UN agencies invested a lot in supporting the medical country to operate the medical evacuations from Gaza.
The work, of course, of leaving Gaza for a minute and talking about Sudan or talking about Syria, I mean, the work in Sudan is very tough, especially with the late incidents in Fashir.
Yeah.
This puts a lot of load on the United Nations. And I think what Egypt is trying to do and trying to reach any possible ceasefire is definitely appreciated by the UN and by Guterres himself. I mean, this is like a dead-end situation.
The Secretary General has been very supportive to the efforts and the leadership role of Egypt. He was here for the Cairo Peace Summit.
Yes.
That happened immediately after 7th of October. Remember, the president convened a summit for the heads of states end of October. So Guterres was here, and he has been attending all the conferences that have been organized during the period of the conflict. He was here in Sharm 2 weeks ago, also clearly testifying the support of the United Nations, and he will be here when Egypt will hold its reconstruction conference.
Yes, which we're putting a lot of hopes on it, definitely.
A lot of hopes, of course, because that will keep the ceasefire and
keep the hope.
And keep the hope. Of course, for the Palestinians in Gaza.
Of course. So when we talk about this, we have to talk about you, because you are definitely have served the United Nations in various capacities over the years. Could you share some of the major milestones in your career and reflect on how working with the UN has shaped your professional journey and personal perspective?
My whole professional journey.
I wish that our listeners would have been here with us. They would have seen how Her Excellency has just blushed because she doesn't want to talk about her personal success, which is definitely really appreciated. Her work and her dedication and her sacrifice with a lot of family life, because we know, of course, that her family is away from her and she is working here 24/7, and yet she blushed when I brought up this subject. So this is just like a surprise question to her. Well, definitely we have to talk about that, because some people would look at a job in the United Nations and say, oh, these people take a lot of money and they enjoy a beautiful life, which I know personally that this is not true. The compensation, whatever it is never rewarding to the level or the number of hours that you are putting in your work. And this dedication is definitely has affected a lot in your career, in your family life, and in your inner peace, if we use the expression. So tell us about that.
Dr. Amr,
we owe you this.
We don't count the number of hours, right?
Yes.
We don't count the number of hours. But again, I was telling before, I will repeat it again, it's not a job. It's not a job from 8 to 5.
It's a passion.
It's a cause, right? You realize that, it's a cause, and you want to really genuinely make, although this is a cliche, but I will say it, make, this world a better place. And you see a lot of suffering. You see, a lot of people that need help, a lot of unfairness, injustice. And the work of the UN is to address these issues. And with the programs that we have, with the work of the UN agencies, to work for the rights of the children, for the rights of the disabled, for the rights of empowering women. To work also, with looking at the smallholder farmers, for example, and their struggle when it comes to water scarcity, when it comes to climate and the impact of climate on the agriculture. It's the UN. UN is the biggest development organization that also has experience in all these countries, and it is able to leverage that experience and to deploy the experience in a certain country. work with, pregnant women, working with maternal health. So these are very human, issues and sufferings. So again, nobody counts the hours, and if you ask me whether
tell us about your milestones. Yes.
Yeah, whether I wanted to become a worker of the UN, I've never wanted that.
Really?
So, never. It was not my goal. I didn't even knew about the United Nations, but I've started working for a civil society organization that was dealing with micro and small enterprises, and that's how I was introduced to the UN. And these were when I started, these were very difficult times for Bulgaria because it was right after the Cold War. And it was the whole Soviet bloc had collapsed. Bulgaria, like many other members of that economic bloc, was going under very difficult, I would say, times when there was nothing, in the shops, everything was falling apart. And in this moment of desperation, moment of absolutely hopeless, the UN came up in Bulgaria with an amazing program which was called Beautiful Bulgaria. That was my first introduction to the United Nations, when UN did something very simple. It started renovating the facades of the beautiful buildings in Bulgaria, creating jobs for the people, and also creating, this spirit, this hope, as we say. You see, you start seeing your country in a different way. And this is how I saw that the organization brings hope to the people, creates jobs for the people. And someone who was leading a small, NGO, we also were partners in this program in the city where I was working. And that's how, I was introduced. And then throughout the years, I very naturally climbed the ladder. And you climb the ladder by, basically taking each opportunity and moving on. And
Yes.
By nature,
But your husband is not a diplomat, is he?
No, he's an engineer. He has, his own business.
But he's living here or in Bulgaria?
He's currently here with me, in and out, I would say. And we've been together for 41 years.
Mashallah.
So we had, our lives together.
Mashallah.
Supporting each other, giving each other space. And enjoying really professional, personal life, enjoying.
Well, it's lovely, and you now have two beautiful daughters and two beautiful granddaughters. So you're exactly the example of feminists.
Indeed, yeah.
Well,
but that is hard work and passion and dedication.
Definitely, passion, definitely, and humility. We can add to that, of course, and of course persistence. Well, we can talk for hours. But really, we thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Elena Panova, to come to our program and to have the time to spare in your very tight schedule. And definitely, we want you to promise to come back again to tell us more about your experience. We can talk more about the different organizations of the United Nations, especially the ones that are facing troubles like the UNRWA and elsewhere. We didn't have the time to discuss them. We'll discuss them in another meeting. But really, we really appreciate your time.
I will come with pleasure. If you invite me, because indeed, I think, there's a lot that we could discuss about the work of the various agencies, the strive to work better together, to be fit for the purpose, all these, fancy words that actually mean a lot for many people. So thank you very much for having me.
It's a great pleasure.
It was really a pleasure.
No, the pleasure is definitely mine. And with this, we come to the end of our program for today. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the control. Please stay tuned always to Radio Cairo. We come continuously on FM 95.4, and we'll promise to come back at the same time, same station next week.